How's everybody doing today? I'm Jim, and today we're gonna do my complete review of the Fiido seated electric scooter that I just did a little intro video on. Give you the results of my testing and go through it a little bit of detail and ride it around and just kind of give you a feel for it. So first things first on the Fiido is the battery. So the battery is located in the seat tube here. And you'll see here, this is a 36 volt system, and it's a 36 volt 10 amp hour battery. So you get 360 watt hours of capacity. There is not listed on what the cells are from these, so more of a generic cell. I do like that there's some UL and some other certification listings in here. So it looks like, you know, they did a good job sorting this out. And I bought this from Vora Motors, and this is a dual suspension model, which was $8.99. There's been a sale on the no suspension model, which I think was $5.99. So number two to cover here after the battery is the motor. So you can see here we have a 36 volt 250 watt motor that is listed at 500 watts of peak output. There isn't an amp listing on the controller, which I like to talk about with the motor because that's really what runs the motor, is the battery and the controller. I don't really know what that controller output is. Number three on my list is the display. And for the Fiido, the display is kind of a weak point. It's just a battery display. It's gonna be very hard to see. You turn on the scooter with 2 clicks on the little remote. There's no key, no other way to power it. That comes to life with a little audible click, and I'm hoping somehow I can shield this enough to see the indication there. But it's just a simple battery indicator. One note is it does not turn itself off, so you either have to hit unlock or lock to turn it back off. Either turns it off, one turns it off, unlock, the other arms the alarm. The next thing I think is really important is the company you're buying it from. So this is Vora Motors. Now I'm a dealer for Vora Motors. I don't necessarily carry this model. The seated scooters aren't necessarily in my wheelhouse all the time. I think it's an interesting option as far as seated scooters go. Voro's had a pretty good track record of customer service, but there has been some changes over time. So I would kind of just research that on your own and see how you feel about the comfort level of the company standing behind it. Now, next thing is kind of componentry. And for this scooter, it's so simple. So you have 160 millimeter rotors, front and rear, with a very generic mechanical disc brake. Kind of cheap, fat plastic fenders, a very basic spring fork with no lockout, also a basic front light. Same thing on the rear, and no rear light, and another spring fork on the rear, spring suspension on the rear. And you can there's a little bit of adjustability into it, but I haven't really felt, you find a little bit of squish when you ride this, but not a lot. And other componentry, there just isn't a whole lot. You got some foot pegs that are nice enough, even though you can see they are quite low to the ground. And it also came with this cable lock that I attached right here. Makes it pretty easy to lock up. All the dimensions are down in the description, and that's some of the stuff about how this folds and its form factor. So, you know, I'll fold down the handlebars so you can see how that works. It gets smaller, and it's fairly light. I measured it at 40.2 pounds, so it's not too heavy to be able to throw in the back of a vehicle or something like that. But here, I'll just fold down the handlebar for you. This basket comes off with just a simple hook. It just hooks around. And to fold it, there's a little retaining clip, and then you just break this down and it folds over to the side. So it's 28 inches to the top of the seat there. So that's your minimum dimension. And the length of the scooter is about 45 inches in total. Folding it back up is simple. Pop that retaining clip back in there. Drop this behind the handlebar. One thing I neglected to say on the display is it also has a cruise control button here, which I'll show when we ride. It's probably my favorite feature of this particular scooter. I like the being able to control the cruise control from a button. Some other specifications I should have talked about in that section. It's got a 300-pound weight limit. Some places I've also saw it says 280, so there's a little variability on that. Sorry, I'm stumbling around a little bit on this new format. The tires there are 12.5 by 2 1/4 inch. I like the 12-inch plus tires, as it just makes this able to run over most objects that you would encounter on your path. And the scooter looks pretty good, like build quality wise. I mean, some of the welds aren't pretty, and there's some roughness around the internal routing. And I also had the tabs ripped off of the back of the front bag. So there's some areas where there was definitely some savings in quality, but I think all in all it comes together pretty well. And here inside, as you also saw in the thumbnail, this bag works. That's a standard 2-quart apple juice container, and just to kind of show you how there's some room in there, and then that's up in that front bag. And the last thing I'm going to get to is the performance. So we're just going to jump on this guy, ride it around. I'll tell you some of the things that, maybe I need to wrap up a few details, and yeah, give you a feel for it. All right, powered up here on the scooter. Just kind of show you how the cockpit is laid out. You got your 2 brake levers with some cable management, and they're a padded lever here, more like a 3-finger lever. They work just fine, and we'll talk about the braking performance in a minute. You got a horn on this side, and this is the light for your headlight. I'll show you how bright that is. It's okay, and you can aim it if you leave it a little loose. It's you can aim that a little bit. We got the partial twist throttle, which I like the partial twist or a moving this direction thumb throttle, and the cruise control button. I'll kind of show you. I don't know that I've totally figured out the cruise control button, but I figured out a way it works for me, and I don't know if it's exactly the way it's supposed to be, but here, we're going to cruise around this neighborhood, which is kind of what this thing is geared for. The first thing we're going to talk about is the range of the scooter. That's the most common advertisement of the performance parameters I collect, and that's advertised at 18 miles of range. I did 2 range tests. The first range test I did in this right now, which we're at the top speed, and I got 13.6 miles, and that used 350 watt hours, so basically the entire battery pack. Interestingly, I didn't get a huge reduction in top speed until I really got to the end of the battery pack. The second range test I kind of did in what I think most people use this scooter for. I did it in multiple short trips over the course of multiple days. Just running around. I rode up to the little corner store by my house, and in that time I got 13.7 miles, so not greatly different, and all the recharge stats will be on the screen. And I could have pushed it a little further, but it was getting to that point where it starts to suffer enough in performance that I would probably tend to recharge this after somewhere between 8 and 10 miles of riding. Of course, you don't know exactly where you are because you don't have any mileage indicator. You just have the battery indicator on the display. All right, so we're going to take off from the stop sign here when I get a clearing, and because this is a 250 watt geared motor, I did not say geared, apologize for that, and you'll see how slow that takeoff was. There's quite a bit of delay in this throttle. So that geared motor does give you a little better performance than if it was just a direct drive motor or one without gears. I sometimes get confused on that direct drive, all that terminology. So you get a little better torque. Still, the acceleration was pretty low, and I'll show that on the screen of where that fell in my testing. Kind of at the back of the pack with acceleration, but my mom rides this up to the store, and for her it's just fine. She likes the kind of more gentle acceleration that this has. Now braking, this thing's got quite strong braking performance. In some ways maybe bordering on more than it needs to have. And I'm going to put in a clip of my braking testing where I kind of went over the handlebars a little bit. And what seems to happen when you're braking strongly with this scooter is the suspension dives on you. And I'll kind of just, I don't know if you can really tell that. When you're braking hard, the tail end of the scooter wants to come up in the air. So it's kind of, I don't think most people are going to be doing a lot of emergency braking, but you really don't ever plan for emergency stopping. So just to be aware of, the stability is a little compromised when you're under very hard braking. So the way this cruise control button works is right now it's popped out. You give it a couple taps, and that's the way I've been doing it, just giving a double tap. If you leave it in the pushed in position, it will kind of take up automatically, but I haven't really figured out exactly when it does that. So I kind of do the double tap, so that it just went off, and then just kind of when you get up to the speed you want, just give it 2 taps and it stays right there, and it works out pretty well. I kind of wish that cruise control style was more common. So we went over the range a little bit, my braking and the acceleration, and then the other part, I guess, is ride quality. Now, this isn't, even though it's got dual suspension, it's not as cush as you might expect. Like, it's still quite firm, and I weigh 175 pounds. And you can hear right there and kind of get a feel for how it wants to dive. All right, come on, come on, come on. All right, well, that's a little slow across that street. So the suspension isn't awesome, but I think it would be better than the non-suspended model, is my thought. But if really that budget, that's a $300 difference, oh boy, I'd probably go with the non-suspended model while the non-suspended model is on sale. The seat on this, and I'm going to stop right up here in a second, feels very comfortable. I mean, it looks very comfortable. It does not feel comfortable. It is not a comfortable seat. And, that's just kind of, it is what it is. It's about, in my experience, about 2 miles is all I can ride this scooter for before I'm wanting to stand up. This is kind of a fun little park. I didn't even notice the horseshoe pits before. So the pedals are 4.5 inches off the ground, and you get 17 inches up to this top bar. So you actually can, and they make a child seat that you can put right there. And I've actually done it where I've ridden and put my feet up here. But I'm going to ride it by just so you can see how that works. And if you have larger feet, depending on how you have your feet on the scooter, you can actually drag your foot a little bit on the ground sometimes when you're cornering. I don't tend to do this very much anymore, but I'm in this pretty controlled park, so I think I can do it without compromising my safety. And I'm going to point it back towards the motor so you can kind of hear that motor working as I go. So it's a little noisy, obviously. It's a little, you can kind of hear it whining at you, grumbling a little bit. You aren't sneaking up on people, but so we're on a very gradual hill. I did take this up to the hill I test everything on, and it actually made it up it. It didn't really make it up with a lot to spare. I didn't think it was going to make it, but I'll put a little clip of that hill climb, how it compares to some other you know, kind of similar budget-ish scooters and the Orca Mark 1 scooter. That little delay really doesn't help out. I don't think this is going to do it. No, that's going to do it. All right, so just wrapping this up here with the Fiido. I thought it was a Fiido at first. There's two eyes. I kind of want to call it the Fiido. It kind of almost seems more apropos. You know, it's not necessarily a performance-oriented scooter, obviously, but it's got some utility that some of these other scooters don't have, which I find is kind of nice. You know, it's kind of fun. I mean, it's a little goofy, but it has some fun attributes to it, and it's you know, a little quirky. But here's one more look at it. You know, if you're looking for something like this to buzz around on, you know, I find, especially me as a full-size adult, I get some funny looks occasionally. But yeah, it does come in a number of colors, which are kind of fun. I like having some color options. So, hope this helped you out. If it did, leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind, and you know, subscribe if you'd like to, and we'll be coming to you with more content, and I appreciate it. Thanks. Hey, how's it going? It's Jim. And bam! You know, this should Popular Scout. Grunt transition. I'm gonna go talk to my chickens.
Oh, no way. It's pretty neat.
Catch the wave. Feel the